So, last week, My Hero Academia, one of the longest running and most popular manga of the modern era, released its final chapter and concluded its 10-year long story. And like every other popular long running manga that ended before it, the ending was received by fans and the wider anime and manga community with varying reactions and thoughts. A time period in the anime and manga community that I've always found to be very interesting is when a manga, particularly a popular long-running one like My Hero Academia, comes to an end. I've discovered that this period, other than when an insanely animated fight releases, usually creates and brings about the most discourse and engagement within the community. And rightfully so, as fans and longtime followers of a series during this period finally have the opportunity to pause and take a look back at the beginning where they started with the story to analyze and process all the time they've spent with said story and witnessing its progression and development through highs and lows, and then share their final thoughts and feelings on the entire story as a whole now that it has come to an end. Is this a good ending? Was it satisfactory? Did the story have a significant fall from grace compared to where it started? Did the ending affect or contradict something that was previously established in the story? Were all narrative loose ends tied up? And did every character or plot point receive a proper conclusion? Questions like these begin to fly from person to person and community to community as all who have spent time following the story give their different opinions and thoughts about its conclusion. And throughout my time in the anime and manga community, I've witnessed firsthand the conclusions of quite a few mangas, such as Bleach, Naruto, Attack on Titan, Tokyo Revengers, and Demon Slayer. And I was also there for the community discourse and reactions that came with the conclusion of these mangas, and the kind of thoughts and opinions fans shared about their respective endings. For Naruto, the ending was a mostly satisfactory one that finally saw the accomplishment of a dream that we rooted for throughout the entire span of time we spent following the story. For Bleach, its ending wasn't a bad one that messed up the story per se. It was just, for unfortunate reasons, rushed to a conclusion that left parts of the final portion feel inadequately executed and incomplete. For Attack on Titan, people's opinions and feelings about the ending were laced in nuance and relied heavily on individual interpretation of the story from the beginning up until its climax, which determined whether or not it was a good ending for fans of the story. For Demon Slayer, its ending was a basic and a relatively lackluster one, while lastly for Tokyo Revengers, it was just a downright narrative blunder of egregious proportions. And now, with the conclusion of My Hero Academia, its own narrative about the ending, for the most part, seemed to be that it's quite a comically bad one. Over the course of the week the final chapter released up until now, the internet has been awash with memes and posts poking fun of and criticizing the decision Horikoshi made with his main character at the end of the story. Majority of people from what I've seen are slandering this route as a very poor one, and upon reading the final chapter for myself, I would have to agree. Why do I agree, you ask? Well, on a surface level, the ending of My Hero Academia is simply bad because the final chapter single-handedly contradicts and goes against everything that the very first chapter told us Deku's story that we would spend the next 10 years following would be about. This is the story of how I became the number one hero. But at the end, he's not even a hero anymore, much less being number one. A blatant and clear-cut evidence that Horikoshi forgot, or at least abandoned for whatever reason, his initial vision for Deku's end. Now, I've seen some people point out that he was stated to be the greatest hero at the end as a way to make excuses for and salvage this clear narrative blunder from Horikoshi, even though he literally no longer has his powers at the end, powers that he needs to actually be the greatest hero. But that blanket acknowledgement as the greatest hero isn't really anything to be proud of at all. Deku losing all of his powers at the end of the war and getting relegated to the role of school teacher but regarded as the greatest hero is akin to winning a trophy for participation in a competition in real life. He didn't come in first place like he was supposed to, but he was at least given a participation prize for his effort. That is literally all it means. All of his friends, who went on to become popular pro heroes, is even more evident of the fact that they're the ones that are regarded as the greatest heroes and not Deku. Deku's so called acknowledgement as the greatest hero isn't actually anything substantial or official. It's just a pity label he received for the effort he put in the war. Just a way to acknowledge the fact that he was around and relevant at the time, despite being a nobody now. But the main reason I thoroughly despise the ending of My Hero Academia is the underlying message that Horikoshi seems to be passing across to his readers through the character of Deku. Horikoshi seems to be telling us that a good hero or a good person is a Deku, a person who loses their life and everything they have and have worked for to uplift others around them. Horikoshi seems to be saying that it's okay for you to not be happy as long as your friends are happy. Horikoshi seems to be saying that the trait of a great hero is one that loses all that they have and need to be great themselves for the sake of others to be great. This is the message that Horikoshi seems to be passing across with the final chapter of My Hero Academia. This is just what I'm getting. And I despise it for its toxic, unrealistic, and unhealthy implication. What Horikoshi has done to his main character with this last chapter is simply cement him as a loser. The one who lost all and got nothing substantial in return. The good character who became the stepping stone for the success of others. And what's even worse is Horikoshi presenting it as a great place to be in. Horikoshi took a character that started his story off as a loser and proceeded to end his story as a loser, putting Deku in a place far worse off than where he was at the beginning. Deku didn't go from zero to hero in his story. Horikoshi made his main character go from zero to hero and then back to zero. This is supposed to be a good message. Deku started off his story as a quirkless nobody, born and living in a world where those with powers were the elites and the ones recognized as people of note and substance. And due to not having any powers, we see Deku being treated by many of his peers as an outcast who didn't fit into their world. But by a stroke of luck and fortune, Deku was able to get powers of his own thanks to his meeting with All Might. And just like that, he was blessed with a lifetime chance and opportunity to finally make a name for himself in this survival of the fittest world. And from here on, we spend the whole story following Deku's struggles, trials, and tribulations throughout countless fights and battles, and also giving his all in an all-out war for the sake of the hero society. And at the end of it all, instead of reaping the rewards of his labor and hard work, he instead loses everything he worked and fought hard for. He lost the very thing he needed to be the great hero he sought out to be, ultimately not achieving the goal in the end as well. If it's not hammering home just how bad this is, imagine Naruto ended with Naruto after going through all that we know he went through in the story, not becoming Hokage like he wanted to be, and instead, after the war, lost Kurama and all his powers, and then started working as a teacher in the Ninja Academy, while Kiba became Hokage and everyone else went on to become high-level Jonin. Or imagine if at the end of One Piece, Luffy for whatever reason never finds the One Piece and never becomes the Pirate King. Instead, he loses all his powers and retires from being a pirate and then starts working a normal job somewhere on an island while everyone else in the Straw Hat crew, Nami, Usopp, Zoro, and the rest, they all become fleet captains and have their own crew. Horikoshi consciously and purposefully ruined the life of his main character. He stripped him of his powers for no reason, making his goal no longer attainable, and made his friends rise to success off the backs of his failure, while leaving him behind with a participation medal to live a normal life while they go for gold as the top heroes. This is objectively bad, and Horikoshi tries to present this to us as a good thing, as heroic. Horikoshi attempts to present Deku to us as a selfless hero when all he really is at the end of this story is a worthless, unaccomplished loser who has nothing left for himself, nothing to call his own, nothing to show for his hard work, his struggles, and his sacrifice, and worst of all, nothing left to improve himself with. Deku, by the end of the story, is in a far worse place than he was at the beginning. At least at the beginning, his lack of a quirk was a situation he found himself born with that was out of his control, and there was nothing he could do about it except accept it and continue to live his life without a quirk. But after getting the fortunate chance to receive a quirk, he ends his story without a quirk again, simply because his writer put him there, and for no sensible reason too. I believe I saw a post on Twitter trying to paint what Deku became at the end of his story as something similar to what Ichigo and Gohan ended up as, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Gohan wanted and chose a normal life. He made it clear and stated verbatim in the story since he was a child that he wanted to be a scholar and not a fighter. Gohan also didn't lose his Saiyan powers and all of his potential. If he wanted to, he could go back into fighting. He still has the power to be a hero and to protect his family. The same applies to Ichigo. Normalcy was also what Ichigo always strived for, but he also wanted to be able to protect. His goal was never to be a great person or to be a captain. He simply wished for the strength to be a protector of his family, friends, as well as anyone else around him. In the Fullbring arc, it was revealed that Ichigo took pride in his powers as a Shinigami and as a protector. He wanted to be normal, but he also wanted the ability to be there for his family and friends when they needed him. Ichigo at the end of his story also isn't a colossal loser. He not only still has all of his powers and is even stronger than before, he's also educated, married with a family, and working a job he wanted for himself. Outside of that, he's also a celebrity, regarded as the hero of the war, and he still has his allies and friends in both the Soul Society and in Huecomundo. Ichigo and Gohan are where they are by choice, while still retaining their ability to fight, protect, grow, and improve. Deku, on the other hand, is where he is by circumstance. Deku isn't a teacher because he wanted to become a teacher, but because he can actively no longer be a hero and has no feasible way to continue hero work. He also didn't lose his quirk as a conscious decision to sacrifice his powers like Ichigo did. He lost his powers simply because of the narrative wanting him to lose it for whatever reason. Deku's entire endpoint was all because of circumstance. Nothing he ended up as was by choice, and that is the key difference that exists between him, Ichigo, and Gohan. Horikoshi also seems to be conscious and aware of the pathetic state he left his main character in, which is why at the very end, he tacked on Deku being given a suit to make his situation look salvageable. He knows he has made Deku essentially worthless and useless in this world of superheroes. He knows that Deku isn't where he is by choice, but by unfortunate design. The suit is an insult, and Horikoshi's insulting way of telling not just Deku, but also us the readers that his situation isn't so bad. At least he has a suit now and can still be a useful hero to some degree. That is what Horikoshi is trying to tell you. It's Horikoshi's insulting way of trying to salvage the fact that his friends who he lost his life, dreams, and goals for abandoned him for 8 years to be celebrity heroes. He's trying to tell you, hey, at least they remembered to give him a suit. They're not so bad. They didn't totally forget about him at least. It's also Horikoshi's way of hammering home the fact that Deku at this point can no longer achieve his goal and dream to be the #1 hero. The suit exists as both a literal and metaphorical reminder that Deku compared to his peers is now limited in what he can do and achieve as a hero. It's also an insult to the terrible injury that Deku is now forever going to be inadequate. While his friends grow and rise up the ranks of the hero society with their own ever-improving powers, Deku will forever remain as the one-time great guy in a suit that can no longer keep up. Basically, he peaked in high school. My Hero Academia isn't the story of how Deku became the greatest hero. It's a story of how Horikoshi made his main character the greatest loser, picking him up from the bottom and then taking him back to the bottom once again. Like I said earlier, from zero to hero and then back to zero again. My Hero Academia's ending is simply objectively poor. It doesn't have any nuanced interpretation or meaning that could maybe salvage it and make it debatable for people like with Attack on Titan's ending or Bleach's ending. It's simply a clear-cut, half-baked ending and conclusion to a character's journey. I don't believe anyone that's followed the story of My Hero Academia up until this point genuinely thinks this was a good ending. Even the gay shippers hate the ending for obvious reasons of their own. And I hate the ending for the underlying message that Horikoshi seems to be passing across to his readers through the character of Deku. A hero shouldn't lose their hopes and dreams for others. A hero can and should be selfless and heroic, but it shouldn't be at the expense of their own happiness. A hero who isn't in a good place can't save or help anyone, and that's exactly what the ending of My Hero Academia showed to us. Deku has been put in a place where he no longer has what it takes to be of any significant help to the people around him. In conclusion, Deku isn't some great hero that was selfless. Deku at the end of the story is simply a loser that lost everything he had and everything he needed to be great because of circumstance and also because of bad writing.